All right, I am excited about this one. We are going to be thinking about chapters 12, 13, and 14. And this is, I think, the fourth seven of the books of the book of Revelation. I remember I said that the book of Revelation is organized in seven sevens. There is seven letters to the churches. Chapter 4 and 5 is an interlude setting up all the other sevens. Then there is the second seven, which is the seven seals. Then there's the third, which is the seven trumpets. And now let's call it seven sevens of conflict, right? So it's not got a fancy name like seals, bowls, or trumpets, but it's still a series of seven visions telling the story. And then after that, we'll have the seven bowls, and then we have seven pictures of victory, and then we have the seven visions that show the final things, right? But the reason I'm so excited about this one is because there is no cycle that so plainly you can see it's telling the five-part story again, right? So what we're going to think about is, or let me add this, in this cycle, each one has had it looking from this five-part story from a different angle, and it keeps turning it for us so we can see it from another angle so we can understand it more richly and more fully. This one presents the five-part story as the climax of the age-old battle between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, right? That this battle, that what seems like a long thing to us, it is merely the final chapter of a battle that has been going on for thousands and thousands of years before Christ was ever born. Since the moment that the serpent slithered into the garden, and depending on how you read the Bible, perhaps before then, but from that moment on, there has been an ongoing battle between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And as you go through the Old Testament, you can see little clues in various places that that's going on in the author's mind, that they're seeing all the struggles as a battle between the offspring of the serpent and the offspring of the woman, right? So as we come to chapter 12, let's flip it around to our map. It's going to tell this five-part story yet again, and we're going to start, and we're going to get the first part of the story. There's not a single part of this story that it's going to leave out in this cycle, right? And we begin by being introduced to the dragon, the serpent that is the enemy. It says, "And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains, in the agony of giving birth." So what we see is that here the seed of the woman is about to enter the cosmic stage, Christ, that is. He's about to enter the cosmic stage, and the dragon does not like this. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. Right? And so what we see here is Satan tried to stop the coming of our king, right? And one of the most clearest example of that is the stirring up Herod to kill all the babies in Bethlehem that he could find, trying to kill the Christ before the Christ could grow up, right? But he fails. In verse 5, she gave birth to the male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, but her child was caught up to God into his throne. So here we go, that he came, Satan failed, and Christ has ascended to his throne. All right, that's where we are on the story. He's gone through number 1 pretty quickly because his real biggest interest in the story, he's going to include every part, but number 3 is the big part that it really wants to focus its attention on. If we use the slinky example, that's the one that it's expanding on in this one, right? So it says, the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days, all right? Now, it says, verse 7, now war arose in heaven Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent. Now pause. That ancient serpent, that ancient snake. So that's another clue that he's thinking about the Garden of Eden, right? This is the age-old battle between the serpent from so long ago and the seed of the woman, right? He says, anyways, and the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Now, where have we heard something like that before? Remember Satan falling like a lightning bolt in the first coming of Jesus Christ? So Christ, our King, has conquered. Satan is thrown down to the earth. Our King is ascended into heaven, where Satan has no claim on him and no way of threatening him. And Satan is thrown down to the earth. He is debunked from his lofty heavenly might. It says, and I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. Right? That Christ reigns. Right now, he has come, he has conquered, and he reigns. And he has been reigning ever since, enthroned by the Father. That's what we saw before we ever got to the book of Revelation. So we're not surprised. It says, the authority of his Christ have come. All power in heaven and on earth has been given to me. It says, for the accuser of our brothers, that's Satan again, has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. Satan no longer can come into the courtroom of God and accuse us because our debts have been paid by the blood of Christ. Satan has lost his job as the heavenly prosecutor of peoples, and so he is thrown down out of heaven. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. Therefore, rejoice, O heavens. We're going to have a dual thing, heaven and earth here. Heavens, rejoice, and you who dwell in them, because Satan's gone from there. But woe to you on earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because that he knows his time is short. He knows he lost the fight. He knows his days are numbered, and now he is on earth. He is down here, and even though he has been cast down, he is fighting with every strength that he is permitted in the midst of his restraint against the people who belong to Jesus Christ. Right? He is enraged over his defeat, and he will take every chance he can get to kill and hurt and harm and ruin those who follow the gospel of Jesus Christ. Right? But here's what we see further. Verse 13. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. So we'll call the woman, I don't want to quibble too much, but it's portrayed as the people of faith, right? I don't want to nail it down just to Israel. I don't want to nail it down just to the church. I want to say the people of faith from whom the Christ has come and who are still people of faith following Jesus Christ. They hate, so God's people. The dragon hates them. He knows he is lost, and he is waging war on God's people. But the woman, right, and here we go. We're getting back into apocalyptic literature, right? We want to be careful and not interpret it into some weird way that the author never meant for us to. It says, but the woman was given the two wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness to the place where she is to be nourished for a times and a half a time. This period that is represented by different numbers, right? So usually when it talks about the good side of it, like we're reigning with Christ or we're being protected, it usually says big numbers, like in verse 6, 1,260 days, right? But sometimes it's talking about, that's all 3.5 years though. Anyways, The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. So let's just pause for a second. What on earth is going on? The dragon's chasing this lady. She's given wings to fly away, hiding in the wilderness. Water's coming out of his mouth, but the ground swallows it up, right? We're not going to try to label every, like, okay, the water equals this and the wings equal this. We're not going to do that. Here's what it amounts to, though. Satan is raging all he is able to in this age because he has lost, he has been thrown down, he hates the people of God, he wants to destroy and eradicate the people of God, but he cannot because the power of God is helping them and protecting them. Is it not the same story that we have been hearing time and time again? In this age, Satan is fighting back. He hates us, but Satan cannot prevail. The power of God will not let him prevail against God's people in this age, at least not yet. Right? So it's the same story, right? It says, then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. So now it's really possible that the woman is the Jewish people, and then when it says these other ones, it's talking about the church and the Gentiles. But I don't want to quibble about that. Because whether the woman is the Jews and the other people of followers of Jesus Christ are the Gentiles, or whether we're supposed to see it somewhere different, the end result is the same. It's telling the story of Satan raging against the people who trust God, but he can't beat them during this second part of the story. Right? Now, chapter 13, we're getting to where everything changes. In chapter 13, it says, "And I saw a beast rising out of the sea, with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its head." So we get to a point where a beast is rising out of the sea. Now here, we don't have the word the abusos that we see over and over again when part 3 begins. When we looked at the trumpets, the abusos, the abyss, was opened. When we've looked at other places, seen the abyss. But what we see here is a sea. But if you will note, in Revelation chapter 17, verse 8, it talks about this moment again. It talks about like I said, it's telling the same story over and over and over. And here it pictures the beast coming out of the sea. But in 17:8, it says this. It says, "The beast you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the abyss," the bottomless pit, right? So this beast here in our passage is it's portraying it's coming from the abyss like it's coming from some ocean, right? And I think it's doing that to echo back to Daniel and the way the demonic governments and the powers of this world were pictured as beasts coming out of the sea. But it's the same thing is the point. It's telling the same story. It's using different apocalyptic imagery, right? But the point being, Satan is striving against the people of God. He cannot win until the time when he gets to bring his beast, his Antichrist, out from into play because he is no longer restrained. And what happens then? Revelation chapter 13, verse 2. "And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth." So it's like everything from the book of Daniel, right? And it says, the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. It says one of his heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its wound was healed. So, right, I think the idea is that it had a smackdown from Christ, this whole beastly authority, satanic authority, and has been restrained, but it is back. And the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast, and they worshiped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. Ready? We're in part 3 of the story. It's not a happy part of the story. And they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" And the beast was given a mouth, uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It's now, where it was strained before, it is now granted full reign by God. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, now here's the important part. Look at Revelation 13:7. It was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. Right? Satan cannot win against the gospel in the people of the gospel during part 2 of the story, because God is sovereignly restraining the activities of Satan. He can't win, but the day is coming. God stops restraining. The Antichrist, which is pictured as a beast here, really it's the kingdom. The beast is sort of alternately the Antichrist in the head of his kingdom, right? So it's all one big kind of smerged together picture represented by a beast here. But here's the point. When that day comes and God stops restraining him, then the Antichrist and Satan begin to win. They're allowed not only to wage war on the saints, but they're allowed to win the fight, right? It says, "An authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation." All those people who the gospel successfully made converts for, they are now all dominated by the beast. He's able to deceive. What did we see in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2? When that man of lawlessness comes, he will deceive everybody. He's going to deceive all the nations, and that's what we see here, the same story in 13:7. It says, "Authority was given to it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword must he be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints." In other words, there will be saved people, and some of them will be taken captive. Some of them will be slain. It is going to be horrific. There are going to be many martyrs. The Antichrist is going to be given authority to wage war on the saints and to win. And the Bible says here, this is a call for endurance in the faith of the saints. You have to stay faithful to Jesus Christ, because in a little while, the King is going to come. Right? So we're going to, let's read one more chunk, and we'll do chapter 14 in another video. It says, "Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast." We're still in part 3 of the story, right? This is the one that this section wants to talk about a whole lot. And let's skip for time. This beast forces everybody to worship the first beast, and here's where we get to the mark of the beast, and it's just telling the horrors of this age and what's going to be, right? Let's read verse 16, 17, and 18, and we'll call this a video. Right? It says, "Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. But here's the point, and we're going to read chapter 14 in the next video, and it's still the same cycle, right? Chapter 12, 13, and 14 is telling this whole cycle once again, right? But do you see, as of right now, how all these things are just telling the same story? Christ has come. He has conquered. He has cast Satan down. Satan is enraged, but he is restrained. He cannot stop the people of God. But one day, God is going to lift his restraining hand, and Satan's Antichrist will come, deceive the nations, and it will be a time of horror that has never been and won't be after for the Christian people. Right? So that once again, the same 5-part story.